just wanna walk with you, Lord. Walk with you and talk with you every day.
All right, Shabbat Shalom. Today's date is July 1st. Yay, Jasmine said, right? Because it's another day, right, Jazz? We got another chance, right?
And it's the fireworks season.
All right. So today we're going to talk about something that we've touched on it before, and but we're going to go into a little more detail today on the matter. Okay, we're going to talk about the greed of the monetary system. All right. So we may be able to get through it all the way today. We may not be able to, but we're going to kind of talk about that. All right. So before we get into the situation of the monetary system, let's go to the book of John, chapter 16. That's the book of John, chapter 16. And in chapter 16, we're going to read verses 12 and 13. So that's the book of John, chapter 16, verses 12 and 13. And verse 12 states, I have yet many things to say unto you, but ye cannot bear them now. Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. For he shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak, and he will show you things to come. I also want to go over to 1 John chapter 2. So it's the book of 1 John chapter 2. And y'all may be saying, wow, we were in 1 John last week, right? All right, bear with me just 1 second. We're going to actually read verse 27. So it is 1 John chapter 2, verse 27. And it states, but the anointing which ye have received of him abideth in you, and ye need not that any man teach you. But as the same anointing teacheth you of all things, and is truth, and is no lie, and even as it hath taught you, ye shall abide in him. Now you may wonder, why do we actually go to these scriptures here in John chapter 16 and then 1 John chapter 2? The reasons why is because there's a very important fundamental teaching there in that the Spirit teaches us all truth. So this means everything. Now this means not just how the Bible came to be formulated together, or how it was put together, or how the world was constructed, or just about His Word. It says the Spirit will teach us all truth. So when you think about all truth, that also means everything concerning the way this world operates, the way things function in this world, right? You think about the Bible as giving us illustrations when it talks about how nature teaches us, for example, certain things, right? The fact of the matter is the Bible is our book to learn about every single thing. And I mentioned that to say too, because Brother D is going to be coming up with a lesson here soon where he's going to be talking about some other things that the Bible gives us knowledge of. He's going to be going into them more in depth. So the thing is this, if the Bible teaches us about all things, why do we sometimes make separations? Like, for example, I hear people say sometimes, well, you know what? That's not something biblical. That's something different. The Bible, the spirituality, that's something totally separate. So that has nothing to do with this. But the fact of the matter is, if we had a God that created the whole universe, well, I think everything in some kind of way has something to do with him. Some kind of way, right? Because nothing was created that he didn't cause to be created, right? Through his Son, the Messiah. So the Bible tells us that the Spirit of truth, the Spirit, the Most High Spirit, will teach us all truth. This includes the monetary system and this world we live in that we call the Matrix, right? So again, His Word will teach us all things, and there's nothing that's going to be exempt from what the Spirit is going to teach us. So let's go to the book of 1 Timothy chapter 6, because we're going to get into, like I said, the monetary system, okay? 1 Timothy chapter 6, we're going to read verse 10. That's 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. And it says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." So the Bible says not that money is evil, but our love for it, right? And that's a fitting scripture because when we start talking about the monetary system, we're going to really see just how some of the entrenches of how far this goes. So let's go to the book of Proverbs chapter 22. That's the book of Proverbs chapter 22. Brother D, I like that echo in here, brother. That echo really just, like oh. Yeah. So the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, and we're going to read verse 7. Again, that's the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 7. And it states, "The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." So here's the thing we have to look at, okay? We all know in here that there's something wrong with the world in its current state, right? And when you really examine everything that's wrong, there's always a dollar bill that goes behind it somewhere. Usually money is somewhere in the equation. Because, like we read in 1 Timothy 6, the love of money, the Bible says, is the root of all evil. Now, do we notice it didn't say some evil? The Bible is conclusive. It's adamant. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. So that means every single portion of evil that is in this world, there's some kind of monetary value that's attached to it. And then we look at Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 7 where he says, "The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." So the thing is if the rich are ruling over the poor, that shows that they are really our masters, right? In this world we live in, the rich are the masters over the rest of us. The borrower is a servant to the lender. So when we look at this, we can see that there's an oppression going on today when we talk about money. The monetary system is oppressing us with the way that it's been constructed. Again, you may say, "Well, I don't know, brother. That's kind of stretching." Well, we did read, though, that the love of money is the root of all evil. So if it's because of love of money that all the evil's happening, then that means that there's oppression coming to us because some people love money so much in this world that they're willing to do anything and everything to get it, no matter who they hurt in the process. So I'm going to tell you one way, for example, that they oppress us through money. Albert Einstein had a quote, and he said, quote, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." Now, you may say, "Well, brother, I don't understand how compound interest hurts us," right? And we're going to go into some details about it because we're going to find out if the world's way of handling money is the way that the Most High said handle money. And we're going to see some differences. Warren Buffett also made a quote saying, quote, "If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die." Now, I find it interesting because these are two of the minds that the world considers great, saying what they said, right? Albert Einstein calling compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Warren Buffett saying that if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, then you're going to work until you die. So the thing is this tells us that the rich know something about money that the common people don't know. And if us common people knew it, then more of us would have more money. So we kind of have to examine this because some of it is actually just a matter of them knowing and us not knowing. Some of it also is a matter of actually how the monetary system is constructed because, again, the love of all money is what the root of all evil is. So, again, these men know something we don't know, which is how come the rich ruleth over the poor and the rich stay rich. And if we notice, the poor usually, most of the time, stay poor, right? Many of us, work jobs and we're tired. We're tired of going to work every day. We're tired of feeling like we're slaving in a system. Why? Because we feel that oppression. Brother D and I talk about this sometimes, right, Brother D? And we feel that oppression. And someone may say, well, brother, you work from home and everything, so you got it easy. But yet I still feel the oppression. You know what I mean? So the thing is, where's the oppression coming from? So when you talk about money in the monetary system, you got to talk about banks, right? Does anyone know where the word bank comes from? It comes from the Italian word banca, and it means simply a bench. Okay? It means a counter, as in someone who actually counts money. That's where the word bank comes from. The Italian word banca, and it just simply means someone who counts money. So when we talk about banks, there's one thing in particular that was done that truly enslaved the world, but that was just the climax of it, all right? The main thing that we have to deal with today is central banking, right? Fractional reserve banking, right? The Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Now, someone may say, you know, brother, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. But see, here's the thing. It's important that we start to learn these things. Because the Bible just told us that the Spirit would guide us into all truth. So do we not think that the Most High wants us to know about this? He wants us to know because, you know, as we talked about in Hosea 4 and 6, my people perish for lack of knowledge. You know what I mean? Now, of course, he was talking about a different scenario there, but the statement is still true in a lot of respect because guess what? We're oppressed today by the monetary system because we don't have knowledge of how it works. So if we had knowledge of how it worked, you know what we would do? We would keep ourselves from being oppressed as much. Because if you know how something works, then you know how to operate within that system. And the Bible says that we are to live in the world, but we're not to be of the world, right? So we live in the world, but we're not of the world. Okay. Just want to make sure it was there. All right. So since we're in the world, but we're not of the world, we need to make sure we understand how this world works. So, in 1913, there was something called the Federal Reserve Act, all right? And this act was actually constructed together by a group of financiers like J.P. Morgan, William D. Rockefeller, or John Rockefeller rather, and his son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., all right? It was also Senator Warburg of the Warburgs of Germany was also involved. You had the Rothschilds were really, really behind it. The Rockefellers were the Rothschild arm of enforcement in America. And they did this thing, they constructed a bill, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and they did it on Jekyll Island, which is a little island off the coast of Georgia. And this act is what created the Federal Reserve System. And by them actually doing this, Congress actually violated the Constitution. And they defrauded the American people in the process. Because the fact of the matter that the Federal Reserve Act puts the power of the monetary system in a group of bankers, private bankers, it violates Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And then when they took the dollar off the gold standard, when Nixon did that in the 70s, that also violated Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. Because, see, here's the thing. According to the Constitution, Congress is the only one who has the right to create money, not private bankers. So now, ever since 1913, we've put the power of money creation in the hand of a group of private bankers. So when you think about something, it's interesting because when you look on the news and you see the countries we're at war at, there's one particular thing in common that all these countries have. You know what that is? They don't have a central bank that's tied to the Federal Reserve System. So we should think about that for a second. And that's interesting because those countries, there's only like 3 or 4 of them left. Syria, Iran, and North Korea. All the countries we're talking about in the news today, right? Pretty interesting, isn't it? So we've seen how when countries don't cooperate, something happens. War eventually happens. Because Amschel Bauer Rothschild stated, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes the laws." So by that quote, he's telling us whoever controls the money controls the law. And if you control the law, you control the people. So here we're in a system The Bible tells us that the rich ruleth over the poor, right? The rich actually do oppress the poor. There are multiple scriptures in the Bible that talk about that, right? The rich do this, and the Most High is telling his people, we need to understand how you're being oppressed by the rich. See, that's what the Most High wants us to start getting, because the Most High doesn't want his people to remain oppressed. But in order to actually not remain oppressed, we have to spend time with the Father and spend time in his Word, because that's the only way we're going to see the Spirit of truth reveal all knowledge to us. And again, the Bible says all knowledge, everything. Talking about the monetary system is one of those everythings. If you want to know more about the Federal Reserve System, there is a book I would encourage those who like to read. It's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's written by G. Edward Griffin. Again, that's The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's written by G. Edward Griffin. So, since we have the monetary system being controlled by a group of private bankers, as a result of that, we now have a situation where all the American people has become enslaved. All right? We've talked about, for example, the birth certificate and the debt that's tied to our birth certificates, right? You know, that's a whole other lesson, I think, for another time even, because there's a lot of intricacies with that. But essentially, since the power of money creation is put in the hand of a group of private bankers, we have the government that pays interest on the money that the private bankers actually lend to them. But guess what? The government not only pays interest, we also pay interest through taxes, through inflation. These are all things that we pay interest on that money that's given to us. And you know what's interesting about it is that we talk about the national debt, right? And we've heard the economists that are actually real about it tell you it can never be paid. Because why? We'll never be done paying for the interest. So, again, why are we talking about this? Because we're going to talk about how the actual bankers are oppressing us. How the monetary system is a system of greed that's set up to simply enslave a people. The thing is that not only Israelites are enslaved by this system, everybody, Jew and Gentile alike, is enslaved by this system. And what's more interesting is that the people that say that they are Jews are the ones that are actually operating on the top of this system, because they own the system. And I know that that's something that some people, it may be hard for them to hear, but all we have to do is go and do the research. And then we find out who the financiers and the owners behind our banks. We find out who the owners and the financiers were of the slave trade, of the transatlantic slave trade. All these things are things that are out there that we can actually verify for sure. So, this is why all these things, we're charged illegal taxes. For example, the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment was never ratified. And so we're charged taxes illegally. The Income Tax Act, because it says that no direct tax shall be applied to the people according to the Constitution. So they're oppressing us. So before we even, we understand, I think we understand at this point that, hey, there's a system in place that is oppressing us, right? They're oppressing us through money. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, correct? Then we find out about the Federal Reserve Act, right? And then we hear how Albert Einstein says that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So a lot of us are actually paying interest and everything of compound interest, and they're getting rich off of us, and they're going to stay rich, and they're going to keep oppressing us. So then we have to start out with the principle. We got to ask ourselves, what is interest? Now, I'm going to tell you what's amazing about this thing about interest is a lot of people, a lot of adults really don't know what interest is. They just know that when they go to the bank to get a loan, that the loan is going to charge them interest, right? Well, interest is basically how much money a bank charges you for the loan. It's basically the cost of you getting a loan. it's usually expressed in terms of a percentage of the overall loan. So you'll have to pay back the original amount of money that you borrow, which is usually called the principal amount. But then you'll also have to pay back the cost of borrowing that money, that principal amount, and that's where your interest is. Now also, something else that's usually included in interest is the setup fees. And a lot of times they don't actually really tell you about the setup fees, because sometimes, depending on what you're getting, like for example, a mortgage or a car loan, the setup fees sometimes could run into thousands of dollars. And that's not even interest. That's just money that they charge you just because. Because we've heard them say something like, oh, it's a setup fee, or it's a maintenance fee, or it's an administrative fee, or a processing fee. But when you got to ask yourself, how is it a processing fee when the person who's putting it in the computer is already getting paid a wage per hour, right? That they're going to get paid no matter what. So how is it really a processing fee when the fact of the matter is the person is going to be there getting paid anyway? So there's different types of interest. You have fixed interest. You also have variable interest. You have simple interest. And you have compounded interest. Now this is why I say this lesson we may not be able to get through with just one lesson, because I'm going to tell you, this is a lesson none of us need to sleep on. All right? We really need to take heed to this lesson. So, what is fixed interest? Fixed interest is simply the interest that remains the same during the duration of a loan. So, for example, if you take out a loan that's $1,000 and it has a fixed interest rate of 5% each year, if you were to pay the loan off in 12 months, the total amount you would have paid back would be $1,050, because 1,000 times 5%, or 5% of $1,000 is $50. So over the course of that 12 months, you would have paid $1,050. Does that make sense to everybody for fixed interest? So your payments would simply be that $1,050 divided by 12 months to make your 12 monthly payments. Simple enough? That's fixed interest. You have something also called variable interest. This interest rate changes according to market conditions. So for example, when the Federal Reserve does something called quantitative easing, or QE, that means they're actually creating more dollars to pump into the economy. All right? Or when they raise or lower the interest rate. All those things dictate what your interest rate on a mortgage can be at that time if you go and get a mortgage loan, or what your interest rate can be on a car loan when you go get a car loan at that time. So when it's variable interest, I mean, as the Fed raises the interest rate can go up for you as well. For example, when you think about the mortgage crisis that happened, there was a certain type of mortgage loan that people had called an 80-20. All right? And this 80-20 simply meant that your mortgage was at a variable interest rate for 20% of the time, I believe it was a loan. And so because it was at a variable interest rate, that means according to market conditions, as the Fed raised or lowered the interest rate, that person's payment would raise or lower. Well, the financial crisis with the mortgage crisis happened simply because the interest rate was raised, and you had a lot of people now that could not afford to pay that interest. They couldn't afford it. So you know what happened as a result? A lot of people lost their homes. Lots of people's homes got foreclosed on. So that's an example right there. We see how, now don't get me wrong, nobody should get a mortgage with a variable interest rate. At least I certainly don't recommend it. Now, there are ways you could possibly make it work in your favor if you're going to be flipping a house, meaning you buy a house to only do some investment into it, and then you sell it a little bit later to make your profit off of it. But for the most part, we shouldn't be messing with variable interest rates, especially on mortgages. Now, when you talk about a credit card loan, for example, which is also compounded interest, all right? Usually those are at variable interest rates, but because the balance is usually so far less, you usually don't have to worry about as much as getting in debt. although there are lots of people that are in debt up to their eyeballs right now with credit card debt, right? So again, variable interest, as the interest rate raises or lowers, the interest rate on your payment would actually go up. Your interest rate on your loan would go up or down, which would cause your payment to go up or down. So the next thing you have is simple interest. And this is simply, because I know we have a few bankers among us, right? This is simply interest charged on the total of a loan per year. An example of this is a car loan. Then you have compounded interest. Compounded interest is what Albert Einstein was talking about. This is the interest that is charged not only on the amount of the loan, but also even the interest itself gets interest. That's compounded interest. Mortgages, student loans, credit cards. These are all forms of compounded interest. And I want you to think about something for a second, right? The Bible says the rich ruleth over the poor, right? You talked about how these men, Albert Einstein, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Carlos Slim, and some of you probably have never heard of him, but Carlos Slim owns the telephone company in Mexico. All right? That's his actual name, Carlos Slim. So when you think about these things, right? Student loans, credit cards, mortgages, do we not realize those are actually the basis of most of the loans made? Not only in the United States, but other places as well, worldwide. And it's interesting that those three types of loans are all compounded interest. Now, that should really make us think about something, because I'll give you an example. When we talk about a mortgage, which means a death pledge, right? It means that's what it actually means when you look it up. It's a death pledge. Let's think about something with a mortgage here. I talk to my son about money all the time, because I want him to have the tools that I didn't have when he goes into the world. All right, I want him to be prepared. Many of us, our parents didn't know this, so they didn't tell us. And so we've had to find out through trial and error, right? And that's been really oppressive for us all. And that's the reason why while we're at the point in our lives that we're at, we still want to be free. But I believe the Most High wants to make us free as well. And I believe that that's part of the purpose with him bringing out a lesson like this to us, a word like this to us, because he wants his people to be free. But without knowledge, we can't be free. So let's examine a mortgage for a moment. I gave an illustration to Brother Virtue here. I said that if you have a mortgage, I said I would encourage you not to get a mortgage if possible. But then the question comes up, well, what if I don't have the money and I can't afford to not get a mortgage? I said, then you know what you do? You make a mortgage work in your favor. Well, how do you do that? Here's how. If you look at any mortgage, you can do the math on your own. Whatever the term is for your mortgage, if it's 30 years, if it's 15 years, if it's 10 years, if it's 50 years. Oh, I know that may sound like a surprise, but y'all know they're actually talking about doing 50-year mortgages, right? And they're saying that, oh, well, this is going to help people out to make lower payments. But you know what it's also going to make happen? People are going to pay now 4 or 5 times the price of their house. See, the bankers are slick. They know this. But they know that they can prey on the ignorance of people, because the rich ruleth over the poor, right? So when you look at a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage, for example, when you do the amortization rate, you can go online and Google that. When you're done actually paying all of those payments for 30 years, if your house was $100,000 and that's what you finance for your mortgage, at the end of 30 years, you're going to pay $300,000. See, the one thing you'll notice about a mortgage is, no matter what, you end up paying 3 times the price of the house. 3 times. Now, surely we can look at that and say, something's wrong with that. Because we're going to, and I know someone maybe listen to this and say, well, the Most High allows interest. And the Most High does, but under certain conditions. We're going to look at that, trust me, because we're going to see the Most High's way of doing money versus the world's way of doing money. If I loan you some money and I charge you 3 times the cost of that money, remember that's interest, the cost of borrowing the money. If I charge you 3 times that, I'm robbing you now. I'm doing more than just making a profit. I'm robbing you. That's not what the Most High wanted us to do with interest. So on a mortgage, I told Brother Virtue, if you're going to get a 30-year mortgage, you pay the mortgage off in 10. Because if you do the math and you pay it off in 10, guess what's going to happen? The bank's not going to hardly make any money off of you. Most of the money they're going to be made is the cost you paid initially in the first beginning, the setup fees, the processing fees, all that kind of stuff. But they're not going to really make much money off of you. And guess what? A bank doesn't want to do business with someone they can't make a lot of money off of. You know why the banks really do business with the common people? Because they know they can steal from us or rob us. And they do it through interest. Compounded interest continuously. Because we don't simply understand how it works. So I told Virtue, if you're going to get a mortgage, you pay it off in a third of the time. They give you 15 years, you better make sure you pay it off in 5. They give you 10, you better make sure you pay it off in 3.5. They give you 30, you better make sure you pay it off in 10. And because they're still talking about 40 and 50-year mortgages, we'll have to look at those and examine the cost of those over that 50-year period. Because I'm almost certain, because the bankers like to rob us, that it's going to be even more than 3 times on a 40-year mortgage or a 50-year mortgage. And besides, which one of us really want to be paying on a mortgage that long? I don't want to be paying. Right. Because the interest rate, like Brother D, is going to be higher. Because remember, it's compounded interest. So that means interest is being charged on the interest even, not just the principal. I can't stress this enough. We have to get these terms. We have to get these terms if we're going to be free financially in any kind of way. And then I'll remind you, Albert Einstein says the one who understands compound interest earns it. He said the one that doesn't pays it. So again, I keep going back to that quote because Albert Einstein understood, okay? If I'm going to get a loan for something that's compounded interest, I need to make sure I can pay that loan back before I'm actually going into compounding for the bank. But he also said something else in his statement. He also said that if we understand compound interest, we're going to find a way to earn it ourselves. Now you may say, well, brother, though, wait a minute. If it's wrong for the bank to do compounding interest and everything, shouldn't it be wrong for us? That's why you got to pray and seek the Most High, because here's the thing. There's a line in the movie The Matrix where Morpheus says to Neo, he's talking to Neo about the agents of the Matrix, right? And he says to Neo, he said that in the Matrix, the agents are still bound by rules. And these rules that they're bound by, they still can't go beyond those bounds. And Neo said and Morpheus said to Neo, he said, there's no person that we've ever seen that's fought against an agent and won. He said, where we have failed, you will succeed. That's what Morpheus told Neo. The word, though, that the Most High wants to give to us is, where others have failed, he will teach us how to succeed. So we all should be Neos. How? Let me explain. Neo's comment back to Morpheus was, wait a minute, so you're telling me I'm going to be able to dodge bullets? Morpheus' reply was, when the time comes, you won't have to. Now let that sink in for a second, okay? He told Neo, these agents of the system, nobody's ever fought against them and won. He said, but these same agents are bound by rules in a system that where these rules cannot be broken. Where we have failed, Neo, you're going to succeed. Why? Because Neo was going to figure out how to operate in the Matrix. He was going to find out how to operate like the agents of the matrix. This is why every single one of us need to be Neos. Because the Most High wants to teach us how to operate in the matrix. Because now if you know how to operate in the matrix, you'll be in the matrix, but not of the matrix. So then I take you to the end of the movie, right? Do we notice that at the end of the movie, when the agents were fighting against Neo, all of us have seen the movie. Neo stops and he understood. He finally got the understanding. It clicked. He had an epiphany, right? Once he had the epiphany, it was just like Morpheus told him. The agents fired bullets at him, and Neo said, no. And then, of course, we saw him pick the bullet out of the thin air, and it dropped. The agents, when they saw Neo do this, they knew he had an understanding now that no one else had. And as we saw, Neo looked around and he could see the whole inner workings of the matrix. He saw it everywhere. This is why when the Bible talks about the beast system, it says, who can escape it? This is why when we've talked about Babylon, where can you go that you're going to escape the system? Where can you go that you're going to escape the matrix? Where can you go that you're going to escape Rothschild's monetary system that's been put in place to enslave the people? There is no place you can go to escape it. Now you may say, well, brother, you mentioned 3 countries that don't have it. Yes, true. But let's remind everybody what happened in Libya when they overthrew Gaddafi and murdered Gaddafi. I'm going to say it like it is. They murdered Gaddafi. They murdered his sons. They murdered his grandchildren. All because Gaddafi had AFRICOM, the African Union, which was outside the Rothschild central banking system. Rothschild doesn't want this because Rothschild wants everyone enslaved. Again, Proverbs 22, the rich ruleth over the poor. They ruleth. And then the Bible continuously talks about the rich oppressing the poor. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Not some, not part, all evil. So then we have to become like Neo. We have to figure out the beast system, which we call the matrix. And now we got to start learning how to operate in it. You see, I'm going to tell y'all, Brother D came to us with some financial knowledge recently. And I praise the Most High for the knowledge that Brother D brought to us. Brother D, whether you know it or not, the Most High used that to actually open my eyes to some things. And Brother D and I had a conversation privately, and I told him, I said, you know, I can never operate again the way I did before. I said, I never can, never again. Because I see the system now for what it is. It's a system of slavery. And Brother D himself even said, you know what, man, you're right. We can no longer operate like this. We have to be different. That means for sometimes, some things we want, we're going to have to go back to old-fashioned saving for it. Or we have to get a loan for it. We have to make sure we're in a position to pay that loan off before they can take undue advantage of us. We got to start operating different because since we are in the world, we have to learn how to play according to the rules that are in the world. But we have to do it without hurting others in the process. You ask, well, brother, if compound interest is wrong, which I think what you're saying, and actually that's not quite what I'm saying. It is wrong when you oppress a people with compounded interest. But did you know that banks allow you to earn compound interest on them? They allow you to do it. You know why they allow you to do it? Because they know so few of us are going to do it. They don't have anything to worry about. Because most of us simply don't know what it is. Albert Einstein knew what it was, which is why he said the one who understands it earns it. So then why are we not earning any compound interest? And mind you, we shouldn't be compounding interest against our brother. But banks, the way they're set up, is inherently evil. And we live in a world that it's inherently evil because of the love of money. So we got to start finding out what it is that Albert Einstein knows, what it is that Warren Buffett knows, what it is that Bill Gates knows, what it is that Carlos Slim knows, and all these other rich people in the world. Because the Bible says that the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. Why aren't the righteous then attaining any of it? Because the righteous have not learned how to operate in the beast system, the matrix. The righteous have not become small neos yet. That's what we need to work towards. So, is it unrighteous to take interest in general? What does the Most High say about interest? Well, let's find out. So we're going to go to the book of Exodus. We're going to go to the book of Exodus, chapter 22. That's the book of Exodus, chapter 22. And we're going to read verses 25 through 27. That's again the book of Exodus, chapter 22, verses 25 through 27. Verse 25. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, that means his clothing, thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goeth down. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin. Wherein shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. So let's break down verse 25. He says if you're going to lend to any of the poor people among you, you're going to give them money, you're not going to be as a usurer, or someone that actually takes interest on them. So when we're lending to a brother and sister, because there are times that happen where our brother and sister needs money lended, right? We should lend to them without charging them a cost for that money. But the Most High even takes this a step further. He says if you take something in pledge, for us today when talking about banking, that's collateral, right? When we go to a bank sometimes to get a secured loan, it's a secured loan because it has collateral that we're pledging. What we're basically saying is, and forgive me, I know we have bankers among us, but our people don't understand these concepts. So we have to talk about them. And there's going to be many people on YouTube that is going to hear this lesson that have never heard of these terms. Or they've heard the terms, but they don't understand it. So when we talk about collateral, that is, I go to Chase or any other bank and I say, hey, I would like to have a secured loan. Chase says to me, what will you give me in the event that you cannot pay for this loan? And I say, I'm going to give you my truck. Chase says, okay, we agree on the terms. They're still going to charge me interest on the loan, all right? And it's going to be compounded most likely, all right? And they're going to say to me, if in the event you default, that means if I do not pay back the loan, we're going to possess your truck to cover the money that we've lent to you. That's collateral. That's what the Bible talks about taking a pledge. But the Most High says that if you take your neighbor's raiment or his clothing as a pledge, he says you're supposed to let him have it back before the sun goes down. You know, if they take our collateral, they're not giving it back. If they take our pledge, they will not give it back. But the Most High said give it back. Again, because here in this case here, we're looking at a situation in verse 26 where the person that received the loan in verse 25 could not pay it back. So then the other Israelite took his clothing as pledge. But the Most High said, you have his collateral, you can take it, but you got to give it back before the sun goes down. Isn't this in stark contrast to what the monetary system we deal with? Because if I don't pay Chase that loan, or if I default on the payments, when they come and get my truck, they're not giving it back to me. They're going to keep it. Well, brother, you should have paid them the loan. I understand that. And sometimes we go through hard times. But I don't see the Most High saying to the one that actually borrowed the money here, you should have paid it back. Now, the Bible does talk about what you borrow, you should pay back. It does. So that's not saying that the Most High is going to give this person a pass in verse 26. But he still has an order for the person that actually gave the loan, that took the collateral, to follow. He says you are to give him back his collateral before the sun goes down. And why? Because in verse 27 he said, for that is his covering only. It is his clothing for his skin. What is he to sleep in? And then the Most High goes even further to say, if you don't give him back his collateral, and he cries unto me, I'm going to hear him, because I'm going to be gracious, because I am gracious. Does everyone see that? That's in contrast to the system we live in today. But we're not going to stop there. Let's go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 25. The Bible says that the law is our schoolmaster to teach us, so that when we come to Messiah, we should already have knowledge of these things, right? And that's the reason why no man should have to teach us again, because that's one of the reasons, because we should already have knowledge of these things. When we come to Messiah, the schoolmaster is the thing to teach us what the Messiah expects from us. You know, the Messiah already expects us not to loan to one another and charge interest. The New Testament doesn't even talk about this. And again, I'm kind of veering off the subject a little bit, but that's how you know we still need to read the Old Testament even. Because the Messiah expects us to know this when we get to him. So in the book of Leviticus chapter 25, we're going to go down to verse 35. So it's Leviticus chapter 25. We're going to read verses 35 through 38. Verse 35 says, and if thy brother be waxen poor, and fallen in decay with thee, then thou shalt relieve him, yea, though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with thee. So we see that that's talking about not only an Israelite, but also a Gentile brother or sister that may dwell with us, that are actually following the same Most High, same laws, same statutes, same commandments. All right. He says that you're going to help him you're going to help the Israelite as you would someone from another country who is living among you. Verse 36. Take thou no usury of him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. So in this case here, somebody fallen poor among us, and we have to relieve them, or we have to lend to them. He says you're not going to charge them any interest. And here's the thing, he not only said that about an Israelite, he said, but a stranger that lives among us, right? Because y'all know that some people teach that it's okay that you can actually charge interest for any Gentile. They teach that. Right? I'm telling you, I've heard it taught. They teach this is one of the premises why we're called Goyim by the Ashkenazi powers, and why they say it's rightful for them to charge every single one of us interest. But some of us dwell with them in their communities, though. And yet we're still charged usury, interest. So I want to make it clear there, because everyone to see there, even if it's a stranger among us, a Gentile, we're still not to charge them interest, because they're among us, right? Following the same Most High. They're part of the Israel of God. Again, not replacement theology. I have to say this because of YouTube. I know we all understand it. But I have to say this because of YouTube. We're talking about those who all have the faith of Abraham. Both the Jew first, then the Gentile. Verse 36, take thou no usury of him, nor increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Verse 37, thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor lend him thy victuals for increased. That means don't charge him interest for the money you give him. And don't try to get something extra for him for the victuals or food that you give him either, to make yourself go up. Verse 38. I am the Most High your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. So do we see something here right now, right? We're not to charge interest to a brother, right? Whether they're a Jew or Gentile. Is this not correct according to the scriptures? Right? Then let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 23. Deuteronomy chapter 23. And we're going to read verses 19 and 20. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 19 and 20. Verse 19 says, Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. So that means you're not to charge interest to your brother, an Israelite, on anything. Money, food, goods, doesn't matter. And we read also in Leviticus 25, your brother also includes not only an Israelite, but the strangers that dwell among you. Remember, one law for the homeborn, one law for the stranger. Verse 20. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury. Now somebody's going to say, wait a minute, brother, you just said the statement right there before that just contradicted that. No. If we're reading in context, let's finish the verse. Unto a stranger thou may lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to in the land whither thou goest to possess it. This person here, the stranger here, is talking about a man in another nation. Because wasn't one of the blessings, Sister Berlene, was that we would lend to other nations? Those are your strangers right there that he's talking about you can lend to and charge interest. Does everyone see this? Got to make sure everyone sees this, because I don't want someone to come back and say, brother, you're contradicting yourself.
There are 2 different words on the stranger, though.
There's 2 different words on the stranger, even, as Tara points out. But this stranger here is talking about people in other nations. It's not talking about the stranger that lives among us, because we just read in Leviticus 25 that you're not to charge interest on that stranger, right? Like Tara said, 2 different strangers. So, we see how the Most High feels about interest, right? We can see that the Most High is not against interest, but we are not to charge one another, Jew or Gentile, interest. We can lend to others, though, that are outside of the body of Christ and charge interest. Go ahead, Maswar.
It just dawned on me what is probably happening here as far as us.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have taught us that we were the Gentile, we were the other, and not the actual people of the Bible.
Uh-huh.
So now they've taken that and turned it against us, and now they're charging us the usury. And
Yes.
of course everybody else is getting hit.
Yes.
But because we didn't know that we were the people here,
Yes.
that we're not supposed to be charging usury to one another,
Mm-hmm.
but they took it and said that we was that other,
Right.
they can charge usury.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's why they're calling us Goyim, and they charge all of us interest. All right? See, the one thing about the way that some, and I have to make sure I have the disclaimer, some of the Ashkenazi operate. Because, again, I'm going to say it, and this will get me hate mail on YouTube and all that stuff. But again, there are some people that have the Jewish connotation on them that are actually sincere believers in Messiah. And we can't cast those people aside because they're not Zionists. They believe in Messiah, and they believe in everything he stands for. So we're not talking, if there's someone that's Jewish that's listening to this on YouTube, we're not talking about you who's not a Zionist. We're talking about those Zionist Jews out there like Rothschild and different other ones that own and control the banks. We're talking about those. Like you said, Masawar, those Zionists have taken it to say, well, everybody is a Gentile, Goyim, so we're going to charge them interest. Period. So you see that what they've done is they've taken something in the word and they've twisted it. And that's what Satan does, right?
They're probably not charging each other.
Right.
But they're charging
Us.
the supposed outsiders.
Exactly. So we see how the Most High feels about interest, right? Again, it's okay to charge interest to a stranger outside of the nation. But you shouldn't be charging interest to one another, Jew or Gentile. When it comes to collateral, remember, and y'all keep in mind while we're talking about this, the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay? When it comes to collateral, the Most High says, when you take collateral from your brother, you give it back before the sun goes down. Because when he cries to me about not having it, I'm going to hear him because I'm gracious. That's what the Most High said. So what about this thing called unjust weights and balances? That's one of those terms that a lot of times we don't talk about really, right? Because remember, we're talking about the greed of the monetary system. We're talking about how the monetary system is functioning outside of the way that the Bible says that it should rightly function. We're talking about the fact that us, his people, the righteous, we don't have knowledge of this actual system. We don't have knowledge how it works. We don't understand how the matrix quite works. Therefore, the rich keep ruling over us and oppressing us. So we've got to finally get an understanding of this so that we can become like Neo, not have to dodge the bullets anymore, but learn how to operate in a system that is still bound by rules. Every one of us have heard the term called a loophole, right? What is a loophole? It's simply a provision in the law that allows something else to occur. That's all it is. But do we notice that it's only a certain people that know the loopholes in the law, right? We have to always go to an attorney so that the attorney can charge us a lot of money, but he can get us through the loopholes, right? See, that's how you have someone that knows how to operate in the system, a Neo. And because he knows how to operate in the system, he knows how to operate some of the system's limitations. That's the word, really. Because Neo found a way to operate in the matrix outside of the limitations, but even the limitations were still within a body of rules for the matrix. That's how we need to get. That's how we need to get. So, let's talk about unjust weights and balances for a moment. Some people may say, well, I don't know what an unjust weight and balance is. We're going to go over that just a little bit. And we're going to give some examples how the monetary system has done that to us. Unjust weights and balances. Let's go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 19. It's Leviticus, chapter 19. And we're going to read verses 35 and 36. Verse 35, you shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, in meat yard, in weight, or in measure. Just measures, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin shall ye have. I am the Most High your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. So, what he's talking about here is, for example, everyone in here has heard, of a bushel, right? For example, when I grew up, they would say, when we would go pick peas, they would say, get a bushel of peas, right? We understood that was a certain amount of peas. That's all it was, just a measurement. The Most High says that when we have measurements, when we have things in these measurements, whatever we measure, it should be true. Let's give an example. One way that the monetary system defrauds us, and you can see this actually across industries, and we've kind of discussed this before, is when you go to the supermarket, the grocery store, and you buy, let's say, margarine. I'm just going to say for example. You ever noticed at some point when they say, all new packaging, you pay the same price, and most people think it's just new packaging. But then if you were attentive and you looked at your old package had 8 ounces of margarine. Your new one only has 7 ounces. Do you see how they're misleading you, though? Because they're not telling you that you're getting less margarine. They're making it seem like you're getting the same amount. But they're charging you the same amount of money. False weights, false measures. See, we have to talk about these practical examples, y'all, so we can get it. Because when you start seeing it, you're going to see it all in society. And don't get me wrong, I know somebody on YouTube is going to say, brother, you need to talk about money. We're going to get there, my patient brother or sister on YouTube. But that's an example. That's maybe a crude example for some, but it's an example. You're paying the same amount of money for it, but you're not getting as much in return. 7 ounces now instead of 8. Just like chips, Maswar. That's right. Maswar said it, right? And we talked about that. One that's notorious for it is Sun Chips. They're notorious for that. Unjust weights and balances. Now, sure, they may say, well, we're telling you right on the bag how much is in there. Right. But you didn't tell me all new packaging and you get a little less. Because if I'm getting a little less, what do I want to do? I want to pay a little less in price for it too. So by the very fact that they charge us the same amount of money for it as before, but give us less, that's an unjust weight, an unjust measure. Is that clear for everybody? I just want to make sure that example is clear. The Most High said, just balances, just weights, a just ephah, a just hin shall ye have. Let's go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 11. And I hope that this lesson is easy for everyone to follow. I really, I spent time, praying about this lesson, and I really asked the Most High to give it to me in a way that would be presentable to everyone, no matter what background they come from, no matter how much they know about money, that it will be presentable to everyone and that they will be able to understand. So I want to make sure, is everybody getting a good understanding of this so far? Virtue, how about you? You are? Okay. So in Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1, because we want to see what the Most High, how he feels about false weights, false balances. Verse 1, he says, a false balance is an abomination to the Most High, but a just weight is his delight. Did we hear how strong he said that is? He said a false weight is an abomination to him. He hates it. Let's go over to Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs chapter 16. And bear with me just one moment. Bear with me just a moment. Let's see here. Okay, I'm sorry. Proverbs chapter 20. Not Proverbs chapter 16. It's chapter 20. And we're going to read verse 10. That's Proverbs chapter 20, verse 10. And he says, diverse weights and diverse measures, both of them are like abomination to the Most High. The Most High does not like false weights and balances, does he? So when I go in the grocery store and I buy an item of food and they tell me it's all new packaging, I automatically know they're going to give me less food now, but they're going to charge me the same price. And you know what? That's a way of defrauding. That's the reason why the Most High doesn't like unjust weights and balances, because you defraud someone. If you tell someone you're giving them a gallon of milk, but you give them 3/4 of a gallon, false weight, false measure, you're defrauding them. So let's look at some more practical examples. Does anyone in here know what a Roman denarius coin is? Now, it's not in existence anymore to spend. We can see them in a museum and we can see them online. So when you go back and do research on the Roman denarius coin, the book of Revelation actually mentions a coin. And when you look up that word for coin in Revelation, it's actually a denarius. At the time when the Messiah was in the world, a denarius was 97% silver. 97%. Did you know that by the year AD 253, it was only 35% silver? Isn't that something?
They did the same thing they're doing here.
Exactly. Right.
Because now the coins don't even have any precious metal.
Thank you. Exactly, Brother D. So, y'all tell me. You take a coin, Sister Merlene, that's 97% silver. And now you make it only 35% silver. Guess what? It can't buy as much, can it? But when you give it to me, I think it's a denarius, just like anything else. False weight, false balance, false measure. That's a practical example. And these are all things that the monetary system do to us today. Again, greed is the motivation. You know what? I don't really want to give him that much silver, so let me take a lot of the silver out. Let me let him think it's still silver. And then that way I can hoard more of the silver for myself, and he won't even know about it. Because I'm rich and I'm oppressing him. Again, we got to start understanding these terms. So that silver at that point, that denarius, becomes dross, right? Dross is simply a symbol of impurity. So we see that the Romans were diluting the amount of silver in the denarius without the people even knowing about it. This contributed to something called inflation. Again, y'all, we're talking about the monetary system. We're talking about the greed of the monetary system. Does anyone know how much they say the inflation rate goes up every year? What's the official word? Anyone know? 2%. That's the official amount they say. But real economists tell you actually it goes up about 5% every year. Every single year. You know, Brother Anthony, he was telling me about some building material that he was getting for when he was constructing his garage. And I kid you not, he told me that he got it for one price in March or something like that, and the very next month, it was almost double the cost. And he said he looked at it and he was like, wait a minute. He said he couldn't believe it. The very next month, he said when he first paid for it, it was $7. He said the next month he went to buy it was $13. And he said he was looking at it to see what changed or was anything new and improved. You know, sometimes they tell us that too, new and improved, right? He was looking to see if anything was new and improved. He said it was the same old material that he had got a month before, Brother D, was $7. That was now $13. Brother Anthony just got hit with inflation. That's what the Romans did when they actually made the denarius only 35% silver by the year 253. Okay, and they inflated. So inflation happened. So now the denarius could no longer buy what it could back at the time of Messiah. That's inflation. And again, the official measurement is 2% every year, but the real actual number is more like 5%, 5 to 6%. It's kind of like the unemployment records today. It's kind of like the unemployment measurement. They say that right now that is only 10% of the population that's unemployed. But real economists will tell you that it's more like 22% of the population here in America are not employed. So again, you know, numbers can be skewed, but measurements can only be lied about. See the difference? You can skew a number, you can skew a survey, but measurements can't be lied because they can be measured. You can measure the silver in a coin. So they can allow you to believe that the coin is a certain amount of purity when it's really not. So again, by them doing this to the denarius, it contributed to inflation and a devaluing of the coin. Because now the people, again, can't buy as much with it as they could before because it now has less silver than what it had before. So it was less valuable. Anyone heard of the word called purchasing power, or the phrase purchasing power? Purchasing power is a measurement of how much goods and services your dollar can buy, or your ruby, or your peso, whatever the actual unit of money measurement is. It's a measurement of how much it can buy. So I remember my parents saying that when they were young that they could buy a candy bar for a nickel. And here today, how much will we pay for a candy bar? We'll pay about $1. Some cases $1.50, right? So obviously the purchasing power, our dollar has been devalued. Well, let's spend a little time thinking about that for a second. Does anyone know how much value the dollar has now in comparison to the Great Depression? So Brother Craig said no value. What'd you say, Brother D?
I think what I heard is that it's down 97%.
Yes. That's the official number. 97%. It has lost 97% of the value.
Down.
Right. Right. It has lost
That
97%.
explains why our paychecks go so quickly.
Exactly. It explains why our dollars don't stretch like they should, right? So the dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power, of its value since the Great Depression. Again, unjust weights and balances, inflation. The Bible doesn't even talk about inflation. So when we look at the monetary system, we see that there are multiple ways that they rob us, and the rich oppress the poor. Right, Brother Craig? Continuously.
When you think about the Great Depression, a lot of them took their own lives because of all of that.
That's correct.
And we've been depressed for a long time, yet we still.
That's right.
You know,
They have manipulated it so much to where
Yes.
we couldn't tell that we were really losing. I think if we could see it like they saw it, then it would have a greater impact on us.
Yeah.
But because they kind of stringing it along,
Yes.
They're on top. We were already on the bottom.
yeah, we're already.
That's right.
So yeah,
even in 2008, there were a lot of people that killed themselves.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, Brother D.
A lot of people, they didn't talk about it.
Right. They didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to cause a bigger panic. Because they know people would panic more if they hear about people killing themselves for that crash. See, it's amazing when you think about these things, because is it starting to become clear to everyone why we need to know these things?
So that means the ones that took themselves out in even 2008, they must have some other kind of value, monetary value. that
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
For them to be so greatly.
Right.
Money was their God.
Yeah.
Let me say one more thing.
Uh-huh.
At the time, I had just started doing like insurance, like selling insurance and all that stuff. Right? He also did, I forgot what it's called. Basically, you take someone's savings or whatever, and they can kind of put it back and you make money on it.
Yes.
We went and talked to this couple. They were in their 60s, late 60s. They said that after this, now this was in 2009.
Uh-huh.
They said after that whole crash, their savings, was, I think they had like over 300,000. It had dropped to like 150 or less $1,000. They lost that much value on the money they had. I forgot how all of that happened, but what it was actually worth. Yeah, that's what it, because they all their money was actually tied up in stock. They lost over
Yep.
$200,000.
Yep.
And you talk about people that they were distraught, right?
Yes.
Because they're older. They were getting ready to retire.
Right.
And these two people right here were candidates for,
Yes.
That's
That's right. So when you think about Enron, there were people that were a week from retiring in Enron, and they lost all of their money. They lost everything. Their 401k was gone. And I'll tell you, this is one of the reasons I personally, when people ask me, I didn't set up a 401k. We agreed that only one of us would do it because we said, just in case, then we'd only lose half of everything. Right? And then even that, we don't put a lot into it. Because why? It's something we don't control. And you know what they say, if you don't have it in your possession, you don't control it.
Yeah.
So everything everybody's saying here, but this is how the monetary system works. And we have to understand it. Because they're devaluing, they're debasing the currency, they're inflating everything through inflation. And they do this annually, every single year. On top of that, they're charging us undue interest, compounded interest. So think about how, if you think about everything we've talked about just today, imagine if we had learned this when we were 16. Imagine where we would all be financially today if our parents knew this and if their parents knew it. But that's the problem. Our people have been in the dark so long. There's one scripture that says that the children of the world are smarter than the children of light. And we know he's not talking about academically. He's talking about the children of the world know how to operate in the world. We have to start learning how to operate in this matrix. So another example of false weights and measures. Everybody in here remember a $50, right? Well, you know, they were produced in limited quantities when they first started making them. And they originally had 90% silver when they were first making them. By the year 1965, that 90% of a $50 that was made of silver was dropped down to 40%. And then by 1971, going back to something Brother D mentioned earlier, all U.S. coins, except pennies and what they call commemorative mintings, contained nickel and copper, but no silver. So now, all of our coins, like Brother D said, quarter doesn't have any silver in it. Nickel and copper.
You also got to know too, well, keep in mind that there was a period, which is shortly after what you're talking about, they started putting up all these coin machines.
Yes.
You can cash in the little coin you did have.
Oh, yeah.
So now there was another way you were losing your coins that
That's
you
it.
had. So we kept those silver dollars. We kept them.
Exactly.
But as soon as they brought these coin machines out, we started cashing them on in. We thinking more money, more dollars.
They were defrauding us.
Yeah.
Like they always do, right? So let's talk about another one even before that happened. In the 30s, when they were confiscated the gold, and how they started trying to make it illegal for someone to have gold. Now let's compare that from there to today, because the book of Ecclesiastes say what has been shall be. There's nothing new under the sun. Did we not notice, and Brother D, keep me honest, didn't it start coming up around 2007 where all these places changing your gold?
We got gold places on almost every county.
Get rid of that junk.
Turn on the gold. So we had gold chains.
That's right.
People were starting to cash in their gold.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right. And we got nothing but fiat dollars in return.
And
We
probably had some type of value still left in the little gold we had.
That's right.
Well, I didn't go turn any of mine.
I didn't either. Right.
But they start popping up almost in every corner.
That's correct. And they were
especially in the
everywhere.
South, by the way.
That's correct. But let's also talk about something else too. I seen places where it said turn in your gold in areas in South Dallas. I was like, wow, they got a place like this here?
Yeah.
So they didn't even care where it was. It was that important for them to take away true wealth from the people and give them nothing in return.
You said wealth.
Yes,
See, that's the whole problem. Where people are looking for riches.
that's right.
And wealth. Money is riches, but wealth is something that's tangible.
Yes.
Yes. And wealth can stay in a family for generations.
And it-
That's right. So the thing is, they took away the true wealth of the people and gave them fiat currency, dollars that were not worth anything in return.
Plus nickel.
Yep. Again, false weights, false balances. The people were thinking, look at me, I got all this money for this gold, right? No, you just got nothing for it. You just got legal tender for it, a bank note. Not even a real dollar. Did everyone know that actually we did have a real dollar at one time? That ever since the Federal Reserve System came, we've had Federal Reserve notes since then. See, this is one of those things that a lot of people don't know. We've only had bank notes.
We had silver certificates at one time.
Silver certificates.
Is a notes payable.
Notes payable. Right. That's the difference. Correct.
Did I tell you what my doctor did before I left? Before I resigned? She had been following me for the last few years prior to my departure, and she knew I started learning about the gold and this and that, and our monetary system. Mind you, she's part of the elite. As my departing gift, because over the years she would give me 1% of her bonuses.
Oh, wow.
She will always give it to me in a check form. So when I was getting ready to leave, she said, I have something that I want to give you that is going to be more valuable to you than any of the monies I've given you in all the years. And her and her husband, David, got together and they gave me gold, actual gold. And she said, put this in your safe. She said, it may not mean nothing now, but it's going to help you and the girls later. And I locked it away. So that he told me she knew something.
She knew something.
But she wanted to make sure I had a piece of something.
So to see, the thing is, see, now through the Spirit of the Most High, we get to start learning what she knows.
Exactly.
Because the thing is, the Most High wants the same knowledge that she has. Children of the world, children of light need to know it too. Because the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. Brother Craig, dollar bill.
Federal Reserve note. Promissory note.
Promise to pay. That's right. That's what a dollar is. So everyone on YouTube, you just read, a dollar is a promise to pay, a promissory note.
And go ahead.
When I worked in the bank, we had, back in the restrictions or whatever, we kept Federal Reserve notes, and he had silver certificates.
Yes.
I used to swap out, by my supervisor watching me, by silver certificates, and I would keep the certificates and replace all my notes with silver certificates.
Yes.
I used to go to all my quarters and keep the real silver quarters and give them the fake ones because the real quarters were all silver.
That's right.
So therefore, there are value in the real silver.
Right.
quarters.
That's
And
correct.
they had weight to them too.
They sure did. A silver dollar?
Check and make sure it's not a nickel.
Right.
It was just that light.
Right. A silver dollar, I remember them being
It
heavy.
had some weight to it.
And I remember as a kid when I would get a silver dollar, I was like, wow, you know what I mean?
It hit the floor, you knew it was
Right.
hit the floor.
That's
But now you can't tell.
exactly. So,
Well, I was going to say, I can't remember where I came across this, but because that note actually says it's a promise to pay, and this is crazy, but if the economy crashed and you paid someone with those notes, they can sue you for
real tangible goods.
Yeah, they can
Look
sue
at
you
that.
because that promise to pay now has been broken.
That's
They
correct.
can't pay.
Interesting. That's a good point.
Yeah,
Right. I didn't know that
Because
either.
it's a legal tender. So
Right.
therefore, the promise is a legal statement.
That's right.
Okay.
Wow.
It's crazy.
So y'all see, I mean, I'm telling you, trust me when I tell you, the Spirit of the Most High is all in this. Because, like I told Brother D, I don't know if you understand, Brother D, but you set off something in me when you told me about some things. And I'll tell you, see, I have to say this real quick, Brother D. What I want everyone to know is this. I started praying years ago to the Most High. I said, okay, Father, I said, I get it. We live in a matrix. We live in a beast system. I get it. I understand that. But Father, it's not helping me just to know it. So Father, how do I use this to my advantage now? That's been my prayer. How do I use this to my advantage, Father? How does now what I know make a difference now in my life? And my prayer to the Father has been, help me to formulate a plan of execution to be able to now change my life circumstances as a result of knowing this information. Because it's one thing to know, but it's another thing to be able to put what you know in practice and into action to execute a plan of action to be able to overcome things that you know are oppressing you. I know that may be a statement that I want me to say over and over again, but we have to learn some kind of way to execute based on the knowledge we know. And so when Brother D said what he said to me about Bitcoin, for example, that prompted me to start researching all sorts of things. And then I saw that I was going back over some things I knew. But then I realized that I had knowledge, but not an understanding. And I said, wow, now getting the understanding, wow, it's a light bulb going. And I told her I'm excited because now it's going to take me a while because we've been living oppressed for how many years? So it's going to take us a while to get out of our oppression. But we can do it because greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. But we have to be, what did the Messiah say to us? He said we had to be wise as serpents,
And harmless as doves.
but harmless as a dove. Think about that for a second. Wise as a serpent. A serpent is characterized as an evil creature. And the devil himself is characterized as a serpent. So think about that for a moment. The Messiah is saying you need to be just as knowledgeable as him.
Correct.
They're crafty, cunning.
You know what serpent he's talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talking about Amalek.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be as wise as them.
The serpent people, right?
Exactly. But we need to be harmless like Messiah.
That's where it comes back to. You have to understand, we have to understand how to operate, how this monetary system works. Because again, the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. So we need to start understanding how money works. When we understand how money works, we understand how the serpent operates, Amalek, who's over money, then guess what we can start doing? We can start playing in the system the same way Amalek does, but we don't hurt people in the process the way Amalek does. Because when Amalek does it, people get foreclosed on their home.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as Brother Craig has pointed out, and I just looked at all my little dollars and 20s, it says the same thing, the note.
Yes.
So, and then I'm listening to what Brother D is saying, that if we pay someone with that, they can actually, the law actually states that they can actually come back and sue us for more tangible items.
Right.
So what about if you don't use cash and rather use the card, something that they can certainly trace back to us? Can they also turn right back around and do the same thing and sue us maybe later on and try to take all of, anything that we do have tangible in our possession because we now use the card? If they wanted to turn it around on us like that, or would the Messiah come back before you get to that point?
Well, Brother
Yeah.
D still stands because when
Yeah.
you pay with a card, you're still paying with the same fiat currency.
Even though it's not physically in,
Still the
but
basic-
it's still
Yes.
So that means now it just makes it easier for them to trace us back.
That's
Yes, that's all. That's the whole reason for cashless societies.
The thing is,
Because I was wondering, how can they trace it back? Well, what you're saying, if we just give them $1 at the store or whatever, but if more of us is using the card, then that just
Right.
comes right back to us.
That's
The
correct.
key is, you can't trace this.
That's right.
That's correct.
But they can trace those
Those
numbers.
numbers,
That's
that
right.
chip,
That's right.
right back to us.
What are you going to say, Brother D?
well, see, the good thing, the one thing about Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
or any of the cryptocurrencies
Mm-hmm.
is that,
Design.
for example,
It's designed to-
it's you cannot trace it, right?
Mhm.
Or Bitcoin is very difficult to trace.
Right.
They do have some ways to trace it, but they're working on technology to stop that.
That's
And
correct.
There are cryptocurrencies out there like Monero. And
Monero is the main one, yep.
You can't trace them. But this is the thing. This is the beautiful part about cryptocurrency. How much does it weigh?
Doesn't.
Nothing.
It doesn't weigh anything.
That's correct.
So this is a situation we're about, and I was just talking to some people about this at work yesterday. We are headed to a situation where this country will not allow you to leave unless you have a very good reason.
Yes.
This has
I agree.
happened in many countries throughout history. The latest, one of the latest examples would be Cuba, right? Zimbabwe is the same thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the fiat currency in your possession, you will not be able to use that fiat currency
That's correct.
to even leave.
That's right.
Because it's
Doesn't work.
not working with it, right? So the same thing is about to happen in the U.S. When it's going to happen, they've been talking about it for years. That it's kind of like that cry wolf. And I'm sorry, brother.
You good.
But it's that cry wolf thing where it's going to crash, and everybody's gotten immune to
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
Right.
that thing, right?
Correct.
It's about to happen. For me, the talebearer on that are the cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
That's what's telling us that it's about to crash, because look at where Bitcoin went. It went from pennies to
Yes.
to a few thousand.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So the good thing about that is you can put your wealth into Bitcoin. Say you put in right now, you muster together $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, whatever that might take to get it there. You put it in a cryptocurrency, whichever one of your choice. One of the top ones I would suggest. And once you do that, if you need to leave the country, whatever, you don't have to have one thing with you.
That's right.
You don't have to have it. You can leave this country without, if they stop you at the border, and that, because one thing too, if you, in Zimbabwe, if you try to leave the country with their money, they will stop you. In fact, they will arrest you and hold you. But here, with this, you don't have to have a USB card on it. You don't have to have anything. The only thing you need to do is your destination, you need to have access to a computer.
That's right.
That's it. So that's a very good thing about that, about this, no matter what you can put into it, because another thing too, even 0.2 of a Bitcoin could very well be
That's
$30,000
right.
or $40,000
That's right.
in the next 5 years. You know,
Cryptocurrency
So-
is the way of the future,
Right.
of where it's going.
and I mean, right now it would be very wise to just start buying, just piecing it together where you can. Okay.
Yes.
Like I said, if we need to vacate this country, out of here,
Right.
they stop you at the border. Hey, what you got on you? Nothing. Hey, I got nothing. I don't have anything. You know, they got no reason to stop you. You out of here. Just get to a computer and you got your wealth. Right?
Get to
That's
your
right.
wallet.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right.
It's in your wallet. So anyway, sorry about that.
No, you're
Go
good.
ahead.
So we're talking about all these things, false weights and balances. You know what I mean? Of course, we touched on the fact that Nixon took us off the gold standard, and that's when all paper money became fiat at that point, which fiat just means let it be done or it shall be. That's all it is. That's all it means. But when he did that, also that violated the Coinage Act of 1792, which actually says that, when they actually, hold on one second. The Coinage Act of 1792 states that Congress shall have the power to coin money, to regulate the value thereof, and fix the standard of weights and measures. So the thing is, a lot of laws have been broken by people in so-called government. Federal Reserve Act of 1913, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, when they were confiscating the gold back in the 30s to give you paper dollars, to give you false money for it, false weights and balances. We mentioned how in a grocery store you get an item that costs the same amount, but they have less food in it. False measures and balances. The Most High hates false measures and balances. Also, by them doing all this, again, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress is the only one that has the right to coin or create money and regulate the value. But yet that power now is in the hands of Amalek, a few powerful bankers that are controlling it all. So another example of false weights and balances, when we talk about during the Crusades, from the year 1100 to 1300 AD, you had the Knights Templars. And the current banking system is also predicated on the system that they actually began with then. So you had a person called a goldsmith. And what they would do is they would hold people's gold in vaults, and they would give the people a receipt for the gold. So what an interesting phenomenon started happening. The people started trading the receipts for goods and services. And when they were trading the receipts, of course, they weren't taking the gold out. So the goldsmiths, they noticed this, and what they started doing was they started issuing false receipts for gold that wasn't really in their vaults. False measures, false weights. What do you think happened to the actual gold itself? They stole it from the people. See, the current banking system, we need to understand the current monetary system of greed is based on theft. is based on taking things from people that does not belong to you. It's based on robbing people. This is why we got to have an understanding of the system if we're going to ever be free. We have to be wise and know what the children of the world know in order to be free. That's why the doctor gave you that gold. But you notice she didn't tell you what she knew. See, she would have actually done better by you to tell you what she knew and not give you the gold. Because then she would have been, as that saying goes, teaching you to fish so that you can eat every day of your life. What she did was she caught a fish and gave you a fish. But we know what that saying says, right? If I catch a fish for you, you'll eat one day. But if I teach you how to fish, you'll eat every day. The knowledge that she has is more valuable than the gold that she gave you. But you notice she didn't take the time to give you the knowledge she had. The children of the world have this knowledge. The ones that rule this system, they have this knowledge. Think of them as the agents of the system, the matrix. But then the Most High says, I'm going to show you what the matrix is really about, so that you can see it clearly like Neo. And when you see it for what it's about, you're going to see the matrix operates within rules, regulations, boundaries. And what I'm going to teach you in the process, the Most High says he'll teach us how to be like Neo and operate within those same rules, regulations, and boundaries.
Which is nothing more than jurisdiction. When you learn about jurisdiction, then it all comes together.
So Brother Craig made an interesting point. You learn about jurisdiction, then you understand how to operate.
And so what the Federal Reserve did, which gave us some receipts for the use of gold, use of goods and services.
False receipts, right. That's all we have, just receipts. It's receipts.
Now, although it's still legal in the United States to barter.
Yes, it is.
And in some businesses can still receive foreign currency.
Yes,
So it's still barter.
yes.
Okay.
So another thing we want to talk about, fractional reserve banking. Anyone know what I know you know what fractional reserve banking because you're a banker. Anyone else know what fractional reserve banking is? Okay. So in fractional reserve banking, and Brother Virtue, you listen to this, okay? Because you're one of the young among us, and this is information you need to know before going out into the world. In fractional reserve banking, only a portion of customer deposits are actually kept in the bank for deposit. Somebody should already be, I'm sure, already clicking in someone's head. This is exactly what the goldsmiths were doing. Only a portion of the money is actually in the bank. The rest of it is invested or it's issued as credit in the form of loans for credit cards, compound interest. So this means that the actual bank is actually committing fraud, false weights and balances. And this will only work for as long as all the customers don't come and take their money out. If all the customers go and take their money out, that's called a bank run or a run on the bank. So if everyone is trying to take their money out, only a certain amount of people are going to be able to get their money. So when the stock market crashed in 1928, you had a whole lot of people, a whole lot of banks closed up. They closed up shop. And when the people went to go get their money out of the bank, they were turned away. The banks told them, the ones that talked to anybody from a bank said, your money is gone.
The banks closed.
That's right. They closed. Again, same thing the goldsmith did. Remember we just talked about how the goldsmiths under the Knights Templars, that's the actual progenitor of the current banking system. Again, why are we talking about this? Because we're talking about false weights and balances. The Most High hates that. Hold on. So when you look at this, the banks are still stealing our money. In fractional reserve banking, they loan out more money than even what they have on deposit. So, for example, if Masawar, you want to go get a loan for a mortgage, under fractional reserve banking, they say they're giving you money for the mortgage, but they don't have the money. So how are they loaning it to you? You know what really happens? Somebody makes an entry into an accounting ledger. That's it. That's all that happens. And then the other person on the other side, the other bank that you're buying a home from, simply makes another entry into their accounting ledger. One puts a debit in theirs, one puts a credit in theirs.
Actually, there's two accounting ledgers.
Right. That's
Entries. One's a debit ledger, and then they calculate how the worth of that ledger, and they add it to their own bank.
okay. Huh. Wow.
That's how the banks make money, because they're making money out of magic. It's all numbers.
Uh-huh.
The pen is mightier than the sword,
Hmm.
because all the swords have to be paid for through the banks.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Two
See?
entries on each side.
Okay, so 2 entries on each side. Okay.
Correct.
I stand corrected. Hmm. So look at that, but it's just an entry. The thing is, they didn't actually give you anything. They can't give you something they don't have. And just like, for example, when the Messiah was led in the wilderness, where the Bible says he was tempted by the enemy for 40 days and 40 nights, Satan told him, I'll give you all the glory of all the kingdoms on the earth if you'll give me an act of worship. Satan couldn't give him what he didn't have. Couldn't give him what he didn't possess. This is how come you can actually Google a case, a real life case that happened in the 50s, 1954. I forget the guy's name, but they tried to foreclose on his home. He wouldn't leave. He took the bank to court, and he won. Because he understood this principle. He understood what Brother Craig just mentioned. And he actually, that was one of his lines in his official testimony that he actually said. That all they did was made an entry into accounting ledgers. That he never received anything tangible. Because a contract states that both parties are supposed to give something tangible. And he was able to prove by the way the banking system works, by the way fractional reserve banking works, that they didn't give him anything tangible to be able to get the home. So therefore, his case, his premise was, I don't owe him anything because I never received anything from him. Henry Ford stated, if the people knew how money worked, there will be a revolution before nightfall. Henry Ford said that. Why did he say this? Because he knows the rich ruleth over the poor. The rich understand that the poor do not understand how money works, and for as long as we don't understand how it works, we will always be poor. Go ahead, Maswar.
I was going to give an example of how I experienced something similar.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, I was on the phone with Mother Mabel, and I had just left my job, and we was talking about maybe I should take more money out the bank and kind of put it in the house and save it for an emergency. So I went over to my credit union, and she was still on the phone with me. And I went there, and my plan was to clear out my account and just leave the $25 original in there. Mm-hmm. So I was taking over a couple of grand out of there. Mm-hmm. Don't you know that man asked me, he said, well, why are you taking so much money out the bank? And so, and at that moment when he asked me, my quick wit said, I'm going to the casino. Mm-hmm. Just so, because he was questioning me, mm-hmm. So I was thinking casino. Mm-hmm. And then he said, oh, well, have fun. And now he was willing to give it to me. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about it. The reason why he was willing to give it to me,
he was listening.
Because if I didn't say casino, then there would have been more questions. But casino, now you're thinking it's going to go back into the economy, it's going to come right on back. Right. So even though I didn't, I put it in my house, but but at that moment I told him real quick, I said, oh, I'm going to the casino.
That was good. That was quick.
It was really, I was literally standing at the counter. And when he said that, Mother Mabel said, what did he say, Donna? And I said, oh, I'm just going to the casino this weekend. He said, oh, well, have fun. And he said, God will get this disbursement to you right away. And that's what he did. He started dispersing all the money.
You don't realize this. Back in the 60s, how many people still kept money under their mattress?
Mattress. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And buried in the yard.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's right. If it's not in your possession, you don't control it.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting, though, what you said actually brings even another point. The Patriot Act. And even before the Patriot Act, they had other things in place where if you took out a whole lot of cash or you were caught with a lot of cash, automatically you're considered guilty of something. Because, again, they want to make it a cashless society. They want everything traceable. This is a system of control and greed, and that's its tentacles. So, fractional reserve banking, again, unjust weights and balances. So, this is where we're going to stop for today, because we got plenty more to learn about this topic. And again, That's why I said we would try to get through it all today, but I'm not going to rush this. We're going to let this go slow and sure so that everyone can fully digest it. Because at the end of it, the whole thing is going to be about now learning what the system does and using it to your advantage. And I talked about one of those things already. If you have to get a mortgage, you make it work in your advantage. You don't get a mortgage and you don't pay for it for the time the bank tells you you're going to pay for it. You pay for it in a third of the time. Because if you pay for it in a third of that time, you just took your knowledge of how money works and you made it work in your favor. So what happens with that is that you no longer become indebted to the bank. Go ahead, Virtue.
But if you pay for it in a third of the time, does that mean you have to pay more?
No, if if you pay for it in a third of the time, you don't pay much more than the price of the home. That's why you have to pay for it in a third of the time instead of the whole time.
But you saying more on the monthly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, you're going to have to be paying more principal. You're going to have to be paying more on the actual cost of it. Yes.
You have to pay more years if you can't afford that, right?
You're going to be paying 30 years if you can't afford to pay more.
Yeah.
But interestingly, too, they say that if you can't do it in a third of the time, what you can do is make one extra principal payment per year. And you'll pay it off in 20 years. You'll cut 10 years off of it right there. You'll cut a third of it off then. But my suggestion would be to anyone, if you're going to get a mortgage, pay it off in 10. Period. Pay it off in 10 years. Because even if you pay it off in 20 years, you're not going to pay 3 times the cost of it. You're still going to pay 2 times the cost of it. So make the mortgage work for you.
And see, they don't set it up, like for instance, I'm with Chase. I've always been with Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have it, like when you make your payments online, you can only pay what you owe.
Yes.
They don't have it set to where you can pay extra.
Right.
In order to pay extra, you have to actually call in, go through the hoops and channels just to get that extra in there, and then hope that they even apply it where you want it to apply it to. Otherwise,
right.
they throw it right on back into the interest. But you cannot just willy-nilly just pay extra on it. You have to go through channels.
Something else on that too. Do you know that some banks penalize you for paying extra? Why do they penalize Virtue? Why would they penalize you for paying extra? Because they want you to pay it for it in the term that they outline, because that's how they're going to make more money off of you.
That's just a way to ensure that they get something extra.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you have to do these things and make it work to your favor. That's why if you have a credit card, for example, the best thing to do is pay your credit card balance off every month. No more than 2 months. That's the best thing. Why? Because they make the least amount of money off you in the process. And they can't compound you to the next world. Because, for example, if you take a credit card that has $1,000 on it, okay? Take a credit card with $1,000, and I don't have the exact math, but I can tell you what it'll be around. At a compound interest rate of 20%, because the average credit card rate is 20 to 22%. And all you do is make the minimum payments every month. It's going to take you about 7 years to pay off that credit card. And by the time you've paid it off in 7 years, instead of you paying off $1,000, you're going to be paid back almost $7,000. That's robbery. But that's the way that people operate in the world, because we've all been enslaved by a system that we don't know anything about. So in summary for today, we started out talking about the Bible says that the Most High Spirit will lead us into all truth. And we know that the Bible is adamant when it says all truth. That means not just knowledge of Him, not just knowledge of His Messiah, not just knowledge of the children of Israel, not just knowledge of the Gentiles, not just knowledge about health, but knowledge about everything, including money. So since the Spirit teaches us all truth, we know also the Bible tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil, the love of it. So that means every single form of evil in the world has money attached to it some kind of way. So if every form of evil in the world has money attached to it, it behooves us then to start to understand how money works. The Bible tells us that the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. We talked about how Albert Einstein quoted and talking about how compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world, and how those that understand it, they earn it. But those that don't understand it, they pay it. We talked about how Warren Buffett said that if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, that you're going to be working until the day you die. We talked about the fact that obviously the rich people know something we don't know. That's why they keep ruling over us. We talked about how a bank simply means a counter, someone who counts money, from the Italian word banca. We talked about the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, how J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers and different other financiers, along with congressmen, did this Federal Reserve Act, which violated the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, and Section 10, because Congress is the only one that has the right to make or coin money. It also violates the Coinage Act of 1792. Only Congress is supposed to have the right to devalue currency. We talked about what interest was, and we talked about how they're using interest to take advantage of us, especially compounded interest. We talked about how the Most High doesn't allow us to charge interest to someone that's called a brother or sister, whether they're a Gentile or whether they're a Jew or a Gentile. But that the Most High says in money, you can only charge interest to people in other nations. If you're lending to someone that's of another nation that's not a stranger among you, I repeat, he says you can charge them interest. We even talked about how collateral, the Most High set it up where instead of in this banking system, where they take your collateral and they never give it back. The Most High had a system where if you take the collateral of someone because they didn't pay you, you're supposed to give it back before the sun goes down. Talked about unjust weights and balances. How the Most High considers that an abomination. We gave examples talking about the Roman denarius. How it first started out at 97% silver, and then by 253 AD it was only 35% silver. We talked about how through that actually causes inflation. We talked about how they've done the same thing with coins, like Brother D brought up. It was 90% silver initially, and then it was degraded down to 40% silver by 1965, and then in 1971, it was no silver at all. Only nickel and copper, again violating the Coinage Act of 1792. We talked about how in the Crusades, the Knights Templars, the goldsmiths, how they started confiscating people's gold by giving false receipts, again, false weights and balances. We talked about how when you go into the supermarket, they sell you something that's at the same price but give you less food for the same amount of cost. Again, a hidden tax, a hidden form of inflation, a hidden way of taking away your purchasing power so that your dollar no longer stretches as far as it did before. They continuously do this year by year. We talked about fractional reserve banking, which is nothing more than the same system that the goldsmiths were running when they gave false receipts for gold that really wasn't there. The banks today give you loans on money that is not in their deposits. And if every person goes and take their money out of the bank, that's a bank run, and the bank would crash because they will not have everyone's money to give. So when we resume next time, we're going to talk about wages. We're going to talk about paychecks. We're going to talk about how the Most High had a simple system for handling debt that this system doesn't operate on. We're going to talk about how the Most High feels about co-signing for debt. We're going to talk about how the Most High feels about borrowing and also when you borrow money, rather, we're going to talk about how the Most High feels about you paying that money back. So we're going to talk about those things. We're also going to talk about something called unjust interest, which is what this banking system does to us. And we're going to talk about how even in the system here that we live in, the Most High still says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. But again, we're going to talk about this all and get it righteously through the Most High's view according to his word. So I invite everyone, especially those on YouTube, to make sure that you tune in the next time where we will go through and we'll do the conclusion of this lesson. Shabbat Shalom.